This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, www.reevesfirm.com.
In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know. Tony Reeves, fire.
Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about.
What does it mean? What will it bring?
This is a reality we simply have to accept.
Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability, and hopefully this video will help you. The Appeals Council, quite frankly, is probably one of the most mysterious aspects of the disability process. The Appeals Council review typically begins after an application for benefits has been denied at the hearing level or a request for hearing has been dismissed. For most parts, if you think about it, by the time you've gotten to the Appeals Council, in most situations, you've probably been dealing with the Social Security Administration for probably about a year or longer. You figure if you got denied twice, that's probably a year at the local office, and then by waiting for a hearing is probably another year. So you're probably about a year, maybe 2 years in. And then if you get denied by a judge or your request for hearing is dismissed, the next avenue of appeal is the Appeals Council. Now, the key that throws a lot of people off is actually, what does the Appeals Council do? Well, what the Appeals Council does is they look at all requests for reviews. They basically are reviewing your case to decide whether the case itself needs to be returned back to the administrative law judge for further review, or whether or not they can make the decision itself. So what they're doing is, when you appeal a decision by an administrative law judge, you're basically telling the court, the Appeals Council, we want you to review what that judge did, because we don't believe that that judge applied the law correctly. And as such, the judge needs to take another look at the case to reevaluate whether or not they applied the law appropriately. Let's start with a few fundamental premises that you need to realize about the Appeals Council. First, it's all about the law, not your opinion. And when I say that, I'm basically saying this. When you get denied at the judge's level, you basically disagree with them anyway. You've just, in your mind, based on the information that you presented, you believe that you are disabled. When you're going to the Appeals Council, it's not enough for you to say, I'm disabled, they were wrong, to say I'm not disabled. And that's just all it is to it. And there's all this medical evidence, they should have seen it the way I see it. It's not about what your position is. The Appeals Council is reviewing legal issues. They want to know, what did they legally do wrong? Now listen carefully. It's not about saying, well, they should have legally found that I'm disabled. No, that's too global. You need to be able to specifically identify what areas of the law that they did not apply appropriately. Now, let me rephrase that they did not legally apply. Okay, so if there was a certain thing that the law required them to do, that the regulation required them to do, and they did not do that, you need to be able to, one, show the Appeals Council what exactly they didn't do, and more importantly, what support do you have in the law and the regulations that supports that the judge did not apply the legal principles to your case in accordance with the way the law requires. Another thing that you need to be aware of is, even though you are no longer appearing before a judge, your case is before an Appeals Council, which actually will be decided by an Appeals Council administrative law judge. You still need to provide medical evidence to the Appeals Council. So while you're going through the process of waiting for a decision from the Appeals Council, if there's any updates in your medical condition, if there's any additional medical records that needs to be provided, you need to make sure that the Appeals Council gets this. They're not going to independently go and research this on their own. You bear the burden of making sure that they are updated with regards to whatever outstanding medical evidence that exists in your case. Now, I'm pretty sure that somebody probably thought about this when they were listening to me, and they were saying, okay, how do you legally know what the judge was supposed to legally do that they didn't do properly? There is no way I can tell you every scenario out there where a judge in a decision did not apply the law properly. So here's what I just give you, my blanket rule of thumb. If you don't know what the judge did or did not do from a legal standpoint in terms of how they apply the law to your case, you may want to seek help. Now, you can either contact a legal aid attorney, legal services in your area. There's two great organizations that provide assistance: the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives and the National Association of Disability Representatives are two groups that have a referral services for both attorney and non-attorney representatives, so that this way you can get the assistance that you need. Trust me when I tell you, if you're not sure how to make the arguments to the appeals council, or more importantly, if you don't know how to properly review your case to determine what areas that the judge applied the law improperly, you might want to look for help. So this way you can have a better grasp of what's going on, and more importantly, you have somebody who's going to argue on your behalf about what was done improperly. By the time you've gone to the appeals council, you've probably been a part of the system for a good couple of years, as I stated at the very beginning of the video. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the appeals council handles appeals from every jurisdiction across all 50 states and territories. That means if somebody got an unfavorable decision in Honolulu, Hawaii, Anchorage, Alaska, San Juan, Puerto Rico, Miami, Florida, Portland, Maine, you name it, they all go to one clearinghouse location that has a number of judges that hears these appeals, and that is Falls Church, Virginia. So you can imagine, if all the appeals are coming to one court, it's going to take a while for them to make a decision. So the reality, and the unfortunate, harsh reality, is that it may take a while, and it could take anywhere from 15 months or longer. And I know they're trying to work to bring the number down and so forth, but it's important to recognize you're not dealing with a normal Social Security office where you can call and ask for the judge's assistant or anything like that. This is a one-shop location that has different branches that covers different Social Security numbers and regions and so forth, but it's very important for you to understand when it goes to the appeals council, it's going to be there a while. Now, in some instances, people will ask, well, can I file a new application while I wait? In recent years, the Social Security has actually limited the ability of individuals to file a new application while their case is still pending at the appeals council. However, there are some exceptions, but it's a case-by-case basis based on your circumstances. If you don't know if you can, because there's some rules that they have in place for very limited situations where you actually can do it and so forth. But for you, if you don't know if you can or not, I don't want you to take some blanket video from some random voice that you've heard and so forth. Oh, he said I can do it in this situation, and you run down there, and all of a sudden, Social Security Administration says, well, normally you would, but because of this. Have somebody look at your situation, take a look at your case, and see if you're permitted to file another application. And more importantly, as I indicated previously, you get your representative or speak to a representative if you can't figure it out on your own. Because the reality is that you might be able to. Like I said, it's limited situations, but if you don't know if your situation falls into that category, reach out to somebody and ask for help. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, how hard is it to get approved or get a decision favorable from the appeals council? The problem that you run across is that it's a lot harder, and that's just really the toughest way to present it. The reason is because at this particular point, you figure at the local office level, at the Social Security hearing level, it really is about whether or not you've presented enough evidence to prove you're disabled. At the appeals council, they're not looking at it from the standpoint of whether you proved you're disabled. They're looking at whether or not there was legal error. Especially when they're reviewing a judge's decision, they're looking to see, did the judge commit some error of law, and that had they committed the error of law, had they not committed it, would have reached a different outcome. But they're not there to decide what outcome they would have gotten. They wouldn't have said, well, if the judge would have done this, then the person would have been approved. No, it's really about the error of law, because the reality is they can make a determination that there was an error, send it back to the judge, and the judge could still make the same decision, even though correcting that error. But at the appeals council level, the focus is, what is the error of law? What did the judge do wrong in terms of applying the law? And then if the appeals council believes that there was an error that needs to be corrected, they will then send it back to the judge to correct that error and issue a new decision. But the reality is, and it's tougher, they're not looking at it like it is at the lower level, at the hearing level and at the local office level, at whether or not you prove you're disabled. At the appeals council, it's whether or not there was any legal error. I've said this before, but if I haven't said it enough, let me throw this out there to you for your information. When you're dealing with the appeals council, everything that you do at the hearing level is extremely important. And you would say to yourself, well, what do you mean by what everything you do at the hearing level? Everything. Meaning what testimony you provided, what medical evidence that was there, what medical evidence that was not there. Okay? Whether you had a representative, whether you didn't have a representative. Remember, the appeals council is not there to stand in the place of your judge. The appeals council knows one thing. They're getting appeals from judges all across the entire country where the judges had the opportunity to actually sit down and listen to you, review your evidence, and make a decision on your case. So the appeals council can only review, but they primarily are looking at it from the context of what did that judge have before she or he. So it's important that if you know there was some witnesses that you wanted to present, like if you're doing this on your own, make sure the witnesses are there. If you know that there is evidence that's outstanding, that you make sure that it's in your file. If you know that there is some testing that's coming up that may have a result of what you're doing, make sure the judge is aware of that. The judge can only, and at the hearing level, the judge is primarily focused on the evidence that's presented before them. The appeals council, and I've said this before, is not there to stand in the position of the judge that you had at the hearing. They're going to look at everything. They're going to look at what evidence that judge had, what witnesses that was there, what testimony, what arguments, whatever expert testimony was provided, and they're going to see, was it handled properly. So you want to make sure that you do everything possible to present as much positive information that you can in your file as possible. When you say, what do you mean by positive? Meaning, like I said, if you know going to the hearing that there's some outstanding medical records there, make sure you get them into your file. If you know that there's some test results that are coming out, make sure you let the judge know about that. The judge at the hearing level is going to be the biggest person that's going to have all that information, because everything that happened at the hearing level is what the appeals council is going to be looking at, as well as stuff that comes after the fact. But really, what happened at the hearing level is very important to the appeals council, because the only way they can determine whether or not the law was applied properly is they've got to look at everything that was before the judge at that time to make that determination. Again, this is Attorney Reeves. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any more questions, keep them coming. And this is, again, your Q&A Social Security Disability.